Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. It was raining hard by the time I got to my friend's house. Not just a light rain either. It was one of those heavy, messy rains that makes everything feel darker than it should, even if it is still daytime. The sky was gray, the streets were wet, and the sound of water hitting the roof and windows followed me all the way inside. I remember being glad to get out of it. After school, there is something comforting about stepping into a warm house when the weather outside is miserable. You feel like the rest of the world can stay cold and soaked while you sit inside with your friends and forget about it. There were only 3 of us there that day, me, Kate, and Kathy. It was not supposed to be anything special. We were just hanging out after school, doing the kinds of things 3 girls normally do when they do not have anywhere else to be. We messed around a little, worked on homework when we felt like it, checked our phones, texted people, talked about random things, and mostly just relaxed. The rain outside made the house feel smaller and safer, like we were tucked away from everything. At first, the whole afternoon felt normal. We sat around for a while, half paying attention to homework and half not. The room had that lazy after-school feeling, where you are tired but not ready to go home, and everyone is just comfortable enough to be bored together. Phones were on the table, papers were out. We probably had snacks nearby. I do not remember every little detail because nothing seemed important yet. It was just an ordinary afternoon at a friend's house. Then Kate picked up her phone. She decided to turn the volume up a little. I do not know why. Maybe she had missed a message earlier. Maybe she wanted to hear her notifications better. Maybe she was about to text someone and wanted to make sure the sound was on. She adjusted it, then closed the phone again. A moment later, she picked it back up. This was an older kind of phone, the kind that slid open. Before sending a text, Kate slid it up like she probably had hundreds of times before. It was such a normal movement that none of us were really paying attention at first. Then the phone spoke. A voice came out of it and said, "It's not much of a big deal, but I'm attached to it." All 3 of us froze. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody laughed. Nobody said, "What was that?" Right away. The words seemed to hang in the room, too strange for our brains to accept. Phones can make sounds, of course. They can play ringtones, message alerts, music, little recorded clips, all kinds of things. But this did not feel like a normal phone sound. It was a voice, a sentence, clear enough for all of us to hear. "It's not much of a big deal, but I'm attached to it." The words themselves were strange too. They were not scary in the obvious way. The voice did not threaten us, it did not scream, it did not say anything violent, but that almost made it worse. It sounded like part of a conversation we had not been included in, like something had spoken from inside the phone about something only it understood. Kathy screamed first, or at least that is how I remember it. Then we all screamed. Kate dropped the phone onto the table like it had burned her. The sound of it hitting the table snapped us out of the frozen moment, and all 3 of us ran out of the room. We did not stop to check the phone. We did not try to figure out what setting had caused it. We just ran toward another room, yelling and stumbling over ourselves like something had chased us. We ended up huddled together, still screaming and panting. I remember feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. Part of me knew it was only a phone. It was just a device on a table. But another part of me could not get past the fact that it had spoken to us. Not played a song. Not made a normal alert. Spoken. And not in a voice any of us recognized. My heart was beating so fast that I could barely think. The rain outside suddenly made everything worse. Before, it had made the house feel cozy. Now it made the house feel cut off. The sound against the windows became louder in my mind, like static around us. The gray light, the wet glass, the empty spaces in the house, all of it started to feel different. A normal room can turn strange very quickly when something happens that you cannot explain. After a little while, we tried to calm down. That is what you do after panic. You start telling yourself there has to be a normal reason. Maybe Kate's phone had some weird voice feature. Maybe sliding it open activated something. Maybe there was a recorded sound saved on it. Maybe she had accidentally opened a message or an app. Maybe one of us had pressed something without realizing it. Phones have all kinds of settings, and none of us understood every single one. We told ourselves it was probably nothing, just a phone glitch, just some feature, just something stupid. But none of us really believed that completely. Kate was still shaken, but she went back for the phone. I do not think any of us wanted to touch it, but it was hers, and leaving it sitting there did not solve anything. She picked it up carefully, like it might speak again if she moved too fast. Then she sent a message to one of her friends, probably hoping someone else would tell us we were being dumb and give us a simple explanation. She told her friend what had happened. Her friend replied with something like, "Oh, tell it I said hi." That did not help at all. Maybe her friend meant it as a joke. Maybe she thought we were exaggerating. Maybe she was trying to be funny because she was not in the room with us and had no idea how scared we were. But seeing that reply made everything feel worse. It turned the phone from a glitch into something we were almost being dared to talk to. Tell it I said hi. None of us wanted to tell it anything. The room felt tense again. We were all watching the phone now. Before, it had been just another object on the table, like a pencil or a notebook. Now it felt like the center of the room. It felt like if we looked away from it, something might happen. Kate held it and all of us stared, waiting. Then she slid the phone up again. The voice came back. This time it said, "I found it." It was monotone, flat, emotionless. I found it. The fear that went through me was worse than the first time. The first sentence had been strange, but this one sounded deliberate, like the voice had been looking for something, like it had completed a task, like it was reporting back. I did not know anyone who talked like that. That was one of the things that scared me so much. It did not sound like Kate. It did not sound like Kathy. It did not sound like any of our friends. It did not sound like a normal recorded voice from a ringtone either. There was no energy in it, no expression, no joking tone. It was just dull and flat, almost mechanical, but still human enough to be disturbing. I found it. All three of us froze again. This time, I do not think anyone screamed right away. The words were too unsettling. My mind immediately started racing. What did it find? That was all I could think. Did it find us? Did it find the house? Did it find something inside the phone? Did it find where we were? The phrase was so simple that it left too much room for imagination. If it had said something specific, maybe we could have understood it. But I found it could mean anything. And when you are already scared, anything becomes the worst possible thing. I remember feeling like the air in the room had changed. We were just 3 girls in a house on a rainy day, but suddenly it felt like something unseen had become aware of us. The phone was not just making random noises anymore. It felt like it was communicating, even though nothing it said made sense. First, I'm attached to it. Then, I found it. Those sentences did not belong together in a way we could understand, but they felt connected somehow. Attached to what? Found what? And why was it saying these things when Kate slid the phone open? We were scared so badly that none of us knew what to do. I could not move. My body felt locked in place. My mind was screaming that we should throw the phone away, turn it off, take out the battery, call an adult, do something. But fear can make even simple actions feel impossible. We just stared at it. Then the voice said it again. I found it. And again, I found it. The same flat tone. No change, no emotion. I found it, I found it, I found it. It kept repeating. That was when the fear became almost unbearable. A voice saying one strange thing can be a glitch. A voice saying another strange thing can still maybe be explained. But repeating the same phrase over and over in that dead monotone, while three frightened girls stood there listening, felt like something else entirely. It felt like the phone had gotten stuck on a message it wanted us to hear, or like whatever was speaking through it had only one thought and needed us to understand it. I found it. The words seemed to fill the room. I could barely breathe. I remember thinking again, what did it find? My house? Kate's house? Us? Was it something outside? Was it something already inside? Was it talking about one of us? The more it repeated, the more personal it felt. The rain was still coming down outside. The house that had felt safe earlier now felt too quiet behind the sound of the storm. Every hallway seemed darker. Every corner seemed like it could hide something. I kept waiting for another noise, something from outside the room, something that would prove the phone was not the only thing involved, but there was only the voice. I found it. I found it. I found it. At some point, someone must have made it stop. Maybe Kate shut the phone. Maybe she turned it off. Maybe the battery was removed. I do not remember the exact moment as clearly as I remember the sound. Fear has a way of turning events into fragments. I remember the first sentence. I remember Kate dropping the phone. I remember running. I remember the friend's text. I remember the second sentence. I remember the repetition. Mostly, I remember how helpless I felt. It is strange how something as ordinary as a phone can become terrifying. We trusted phones. We used them constantly. They were for texting friends, calling parents, playing games, taking pictures, wasting time. They belonged to our normal lives. But that day, Kate's phone stopped feeling like a phone. It felt like a little black box with something inside it that could hear us, answer us, or at least speak when it wanted to. I have tried to explain it over the years. Maybe the phone had a voice feature none of us knew about. Maybe it was reading some text out loud. Maybe there was an accessibility setting that got turned on by accident. Maybe the words came from a saved message, a ringtone, or some weird downloaded audio. Maybe someone had sent her something that played automatically when the phone opened. Maybe it was a prank we never understood. Those are all possible. But at the time, we did not know any of that. We were not thinking like adults trying to solve a technical problem. We were scared kids in a house during a rainstorm, listening to a phone speak in a voice we did not recognize, and the words were just wrong enough to feel dangerous. It's not much of a big deal, but I'm attached to it. I found it. I found it. I found it. That combination still bothers me. The first line sounded almost like something explaining itself. Attached to it. Attached to what? The phone? A person? A place? Then the second line sounded like a discovery. It found something. Maybe the thing it was attached to. Maybe us. Maybe something we did not want found. I know that sounds dramatic, but fear makes words grow. A simple sentence can become terrifying when you do not know who is saying it. I can still picture us standing there, all three of us frozen, staring at Kate's phone like it might do something worse. I can still hear Kathy's scream. I can still see Kate dropping the phone onto the table. I can still feel that burst of panic as we ran into another room, not because we had any plan, but because distance felt like the only answer. The worst part is that there was nothing to run from. No person standing in the room, no face at the window, no footsteps in the hall. Just a phone. That made it feel even stranger. If there had been someone there, we would at least know what scared us. Instead, the fear came from something familiar, acting in a way it should not. It was not supposed to talk like that. It was not supposed to speak in a voice none of us knew. It was not supposed to repeat a phrase that made it sound like something had been found. Even now, when I think back on it, I can explain pieces of it logically, but I cannot fully get rid of the feeling from that day. The rain, the after-school quiet, the phone sliding open, the sudden voice, the way we all froze because we all heard it. That matters to me too. It was not just one person hearing something. All three of us reacted. All three of us were scared. Maybe there was a normal explanation. Maybe there was a feature on the phone that none of us understood. Maybe the voice came from some app, some recording, some accidental setting. But whatever it was, that moment felt real. And when the phone kept saying, "I found it," over and over again, I remember being so scared I could not move. I arrived at my sister's new house really late one night after a long drive from San Francisco. It had taken me about 6 hours to get there, and by the time I finally pulled up, I was exhausted in that heavy road trip way where your body feels like it is still moving even after the car has stopped. My eyes were tired, my back was stiff, and my brain felt slow from staring at dark roads and headlights for hours. My sister had recently moved into the house, so it was still new to me. I had not spent much time there yet. Everything about it felt unfamiliar, especially arriving so late at night. A new house always has its own sounds and shadows, and when you walk into one after a long drive, you do not really know the layout well enough to feel completely comfortable. You have to learn where the bathroom is, where the guest room is, which hallway leads where, what each room looks like in the dark. Until then, you are just a visitor, trying to make sense of someone else's space. My sister was still awake when I got there. We talked for a little while, probably catching up, asking about the drive, saying the usual things people say when someone arrives late. But it was clear that both of us were tired. It was too late for a long conversation. After a bit, she went off to bed, and I settled down on the couch. I do not even think I meant to sleep there for the night. I was just too tired to move right away. The couch was there, the house was quiet, and my body finally had a place to stop. So I lay down, closed my eyes, and drifted off. At some point later, I woke up. I do not know how long I had been asleep, maybe an hour, maybe more. I only remember waking in that groggy, confused way where you are not fully sure where you are at first. The living room was dark, and it took me a few seconds to remember that I was at my sister's new house. Once I did, I realized I should probably go to the actual guest room instead of spending the whole night on the couch. So I dragged myself up. I was half asleep as I made my way through the house. I did not turn on many lights, if any. I just moved slowly, relying on memory from whatever little tour I had been given earlier. The house was quiet. My sister and brother-in-law were asleep. Everything had that deep, late-night stillness that makes even a normal hallway feel longer than it really is. Eventually, I found the guest room and got into bed. Because I was so tired, I did not pay much attention to the room. That became important later. I did not study where everything was. I did not think about the angle of the bed, the doorway, the closet, or the furniture. I just crawled into bed and tried to fall asleep again. I must have ended up lying at a strange angle, not really aligned the way I thought I was. But at the time, I did not notice. I was too exhausted to care. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up again. This time, something woke me. At first, I was not fully alert. I was lying there in the dark, trying to understand why my eyes had opened. The room was quiet, but there was light. Not a room light, not the kind of glow that comes from a lamp being switched on. It looked more like a flashlight beam coming into the room. In my sleepy mind, I thought it was my sister or my brother-in-law. That seemed like the most reasonable explanation. Maybe they had heard me moving around earlier and wanted to check that I had found the guest room. Maybe they were going to make sure I was comfortable. Maybe one of them was walking through the hallway with a flashlight or some small light, trying not to wake anyone. The light seemed to be coming from the direction of the doorway, slowly moving into the room. Because I was still half asleep, I did not immediately say anything. Instead, my tired brain came up with what seemed like a funny idea at the time. I decided I would wait until whoever it was got close enough, then jump out and scare them. It felt like a harmless little prank. They were checking on me, I would surprise them, and then we would all laugh about it. So I stayed still. The light moved closer. I watched it in the darkness, waiting for the right moment. It looked like someone was approaching the side of the bed with a flashlight. I could not see a person clearly, just the light. But in my mind, the explanation was already set. It had to be my sister or brother-in-law. Who else would be in the house? Who else would be coming into the guest room in the middle of the night? The light got close enough. I jumped at it and slammed straight into the wall beside the bed. The shock of that was instant and confusing. One moment I thought I was lunging toward someone standing near the doorway. The next, I had hit the wall hard enough to snap myself fully awake. There was no person there, no body, no flashlight in anyone's hand. Just the wall next to the bed, much closer than I had believed it was. At the same time, the light shot upward toward the ceiling, then it disappeared. That was when the fear started to creep in. For a few seconds, I was completely disoriented. I had been certain the light was coming from the doorway. I had been certain someone was walking toward me. But I had jumped in the wrong direction and hit a wall. The light had moved in a way that made no sense, shooting up toward the ceiling before vanishing. The room was dark again, and now I was wide awake. I fumbled for the bedside light and turned it on. The room filled with normal light, and I finally saw the space clearly. That was when I realized what had happened, at least partly. Because I had fallen asleep at an odd angle, I had misunderstood the layout of the room. What I thought was the doorway was not the doorway at all. The light had not been coming from where I thought it was coming from. It had been coming from the closet mirror. There was a mirror on the closet, and in the darkness, while I was half asleep and turned the wrong way in the bed, I had mistaken the reflection or movement of light in that mirror for a flashlight entering the room. Somehow, the angle had fooled my groggy brain completely. I thought the light was moving toward me from the door, but it was actually a reflection in the mirror. That explained why I hit the wall. It did not make me feel much better, because even after I understood the mirror part, I still did not know what the light had actually been. Where had it come from? What had reflected in the mirror? Why did it look like a flashlight beam moving into the room? Why did it shoot up toward the ceiling and disappear when I jumped? Maybe it was a car outside. Maybe headlights passed through a window at just the right angle. Maybe someone outside moved a light. Maybe it was a reflection from something in the room. Maybe my sleepy mind exaggerated a small glow into something much bigger. Those are all possible explanations. But at that hour, sitting in a guest bedroom in a new house after slamming into a wall because I had lunged at a light that was not where I thought it was, I was not feeling logical. I was scared. The room suddenly felt wrong. The mirror bothered me the most. Mirrors at night already have a way of making a room feel less safe. During the day, they are just mirrors. At night, especially in a room you do not know well, they become dark surfaces that hold shapes and reflections you cannot easily understand. If you are half asleep, a mirror can turn the whole room against you. It can make a wall look like a doorway. It can make a reflection look like something approaching, and that was exactly what had happened. I kept looking at the closet mirror, trying to make sense of the angle. I wanted to recreate it in my head, to prove to myself that it had only been a reflection. But the more I looked at it, the more uncomfortable I became. The light was gone. The room was still. There was no obvious source. Nothing outside was moving now. There was no one in the doorway, no one in the closet, no one by the bed. Just me, the bed, the mirror, and a feeling I could not shake. Needless to say, I did not stay in that room. I got out of bed and went back to the living room. This time I turned on all the lights I could. I turned on the TV too. I did not care if it was childish. I did not care if I was being ridiculous. I wanted noise. I wanted light. I wanted the room to feel occupied. After what had just happened, there was no way I was going to lie back down in that guest room with the closet mirror reflecting darkness at me. So I spent the rest of the night in the living room with the lights and TV on. I probably did not sleep much after that. Maybe I dozed a little, but not deeply. Every sound in the house seemed louder than it should have. Every shift of light made me look up. The TV helped, but it did not erase the feeling of waking in that room and seeing what I thought was a flashlight beam moving toward me. In the morning, everything looked normal again, the way it always does after a scare. The guest room was just a guest room. The closet mirror was just a mirror. The wall I had hit was just a wall. In daylight, the whole thing seemed easier to explain away. I had been tired from a 6-hour drive. I had fallen asleep in an unfamiliar room at an odd angle. I had seen a reflection and mistaken it for someone entering the room. Simple enough, but I still did not like that room. And then there was one more detail about the house that made the whole thing harder to dismiss. My sister's home had been built in an old orange orchard. That alone is not creepy. A lot of land used for homes used to be something else. Fields, orchards, farms, empty lots. Places change. People build new neighborhoods over old land all the time. But this orchard supposedly had once had an Indian burial ground in one corner. I do not know all the history. I do not know exactly where the burial ground was, how close it was to the house, or how much truth there was to the story. It may have been one of those local things people say after houses are built on old land. But once I heard it, it attached itself to the memory of that night. An old orange orchard, a burial ground in one corner, a new house, a guest room mirror, a light that looked like someone entering in the middle of the night. Maybe none of those things are connected. They probably are not. But when you have a strange experience in a house, any detail like that becomes part of the story. It gives your fear somewhere to grow. It makes you wonder if the land remembers what used to be there, or if houses built on certain places carry something from before. I try to stay reasonable about it. I know exhaustion can play tricks on you. I know mirrors can distort space in the dark. I know headlights, moonlight, reflections, and a half-asleep brain can create something that feels impossible. The most likely explanation is that I was groggy, disoriented, and fooled by the mirror. But the way the light moved still bothers me. It did not just sit there. It seemed to come into the room, closer and closer, like someone carrying a flashlight. It got close enough that I thought I could jump at it. Then when I did, it shot up to the ceiling and vanished. Even if it was only a reflection, it felt too active in the moment, too much like it had reacted. That is what kept me from going back to sleep in that room. Not the explanation, the feeling. I can still remember lying there, waiting to scare whoever I thought was coming toward me. I can still remember the confidence I had for those few seconds, thinking I was about to jump out and frighten my sister or brother-in-law. I can still remember lunging, hitting the wall instead, and realizing instantly that I had misunderstood everything about the room around me. That kind of disorientation is frightening on its own. You trust your senses in the dark even when you should not. You think you know where the door is. You think you know where the light is coming from. You think you know what is moving toward you. Then one wrong movement proves that your whole understanding of the room is off. And for a moment, you are not just scared of the light. You are scared because you cannot trust what you are seeing. That night left me with a dislike of sleeping near mirrors in unfamiliar rooms. Even now, if I am staying somewhere and there is a large mirror facing the bed or angled in a strange way, I notice it. I may not be terrified, but I am aware of it. I think about reflections, about how easily they can turn a dark room into a confusing one. I think about waking up half asleep and seeing something that appears to move. I also think about that house. I wonder whether anyone else ever experienced anything strange there. Maybe my sister never did. Maybe the house was completely normal. Maybe I was the only one who had a weird night because I arrived exhausted, slept at a strange angle, and let a reflection scare me badly enough to spend the night in the living room. That is possible. But still, when I remember it, the whole scene feels unsettling. The late drive from San Francisco, the quiet conversation with my sister, falling asleep on the couch, dragging myself into the guest room in the middle of the night, waking to what looked like a flashlight entering the room, waiting to jump at it, hitting the wall, the light shooting up and disappearing, realizing it had come from the closet mirror, then sitting in the living room with every light on and the TV playing because I could not bring myself to stay in that room. Maybe it was nothing more than a reflection. Maybe it was the house settling into my imagination. Maybe the history of the land had nothing to do with it. But I know how it felt in that moment. It felt like something had come into the room while I was sleeping, and for one terrible second, when I jumped and hit only the wall, it felt like whatever I had seen had never been where a person should have been at all. About 5 years ago, I was at home in the middle of the night watching a movie by myself. That was normal for me at the time. I had always been a night owl, the kind of person who could stay awake until morning without thinking much of it. My sleep schedule was so bad back then that I would sometimes sleep when the sun came up and end up skipping school the next day. It was not healthy, but at that age, staying up late felt natural. The night felt like my time. The house would usually be quiet at that hour. Everyone else would be asleep, and I would sit there in the living room with only the light from the TV keeping me company. I liked the quiet. I liked the feeling of being the only person awake. It made the house feel different, almost like it belonged to me for a few hours. During the day, there were voices, movement, chores, people coming in and out. But at night, everything slowed down. The rooms became still, and the whole place felt separate from the rest of the world. I was used to moving around in the dark, too. I did not always turn on lights when I walked through the house at night. Part of that was habit, and part of it was because I did not want to wake anyone up. But honestly, I was also just comfortable with darkness. Some people panic if they cannot see every corner of a room. I was not like that. I could walk through the house, find my way, get a drink, go to the bathroom, and come back without needing to turn on a single light. That night, while I was watching the movie, I got thirsty. I got up from the living room and went to the kitchen at the back of the house. The kitchen had a large window on the left wall, and that window faced a small backyard. The backyard was not big, maybe about the size of a bedroom, but because it was enclosed and dark, it always felt larger at night. There was no light out there. The only light that reached it came from the living room, and even that was weak by the time it passed through the house. If the living room light or TV glow was the only source, the backyard was mostly just a dark square beyond the glass. I did not turn on the kitchen light. That was normal for me. I was used to the dark, and I knew where everything was. I went to get a glass and started pouring water. The kitchen was almost completely black around me, with only a faint amount of light coming from the living room behind me. I could make out shapes, but not much more. The sink, the counter, the glass in my hand, all of it was mostly guided by memory. As I was pouring the water, I heard a sound. A creak. Not a tiny sound either. It was clear enough that I stopped what I was doing. It had that slow, drawn-out sound of a door moving on its hinges. Creak. I lifted my head and looked toward the backyard through the big kitchen window. At first, I did not see anything unusual. The backyard was dark, like always. The window reflected some of the inside shadows back at me, so it was hard to see perfectly, but nothing looked out of place. No person standing there, no movement, no shape crossing the yard. Just the same dark little backyard I had seen so many times before. Still, the sound had come from somewhere. I left the kitchen and went to check the door that led to the backyard. That was when I saw it was ajar. The door was open just a little. That immediately felt strange because that door was almost always closed. We had a dog, and my aunt, who I lived with, did not let the dog come inside the house because it would pee and make a mess. Because of that, the backyard door was kept shut most of the time. It was not the kind of door that was left open casually, especially at night. Seeing it slightly open after hearing that creak made me pause. I did not feel scared right away, but I definitely noticed it. I opened the door more and looked into the backyard. The backyard was dark, but I knew the space well. The bathrooms were out there too, off to the left side of the backyard. Since I was a kid, I had been used to going out there in total darkness when I needed the bathroom at night, because there was no lamp in the bathroom. It was not exactly comfortable, but it was normal for us. It was just one of those things about the house that you got used to, even if other people would probably think it was strange. I stepped out or looked around carefully, checking the backyard. There was nothing there except my dog. The dog was calm. That detail mattered to me. If someone had come into the yard, or if something unusual had happened, I expected the dog to react. My dog was not silent when it wanted something. If it tried to open a door or get inside, it made a lot of noise. It would scratch, push, move around, and make such a ruckus that I would know immediately. It could not have opened the door quietly. That was not how the dog behaved. But there it was, calm, doing nothing strange. The door being open made no sense. I looked around the backyard again, trying to find an explanation. Maybe the wind had pushed it open. Maybe someone had not closed it properly earlier. Maybe the door had been sitting loose and finally shifted. Those were possible answers, but none of them felt completely satisfying in the moment. The creaking sound had been clear. The door had been closed as far as I knew. Now it was open. And the dog, the only living thing back there, was calm and quiet. What made the whole thing feel different was what had happened a couple of weeks earlier. My mom had died. It was still very fresh. Only a few weeks had passed, and grief was still sitting over everything. When someone dies, especially someone as close as your mother, the whole world changes in ways that are hard to explain. The house feels different. Ordinary things feel different. Silence feels different. You notice absence everywhere. You expect to hear a voice that is no longer there. You think of telling someone something, then remember you cannot. Everything becomes touched by the loss. In my family, there was a belief that when someone dies, their spirit stays on earth for 40 days before passing on to the next world. I had grown up around that belief, so it was not some strange idea to me. It was part of how people talked about death. The dead were not immediately gone forever. For a time, they might still be close. They might still be around the house. They might visit, linger, or watch over the people they loved before moving on. Because of that, when I saw the open door, I did not feel scared. That may sound strange, but it is true. If anything, I felt calm, maybe curious, maybe thoughtful, but not terrified. The timing made me think of my mom immediately. The door opening in the middle of the night, the quiet house, the calm dog, the belief that spirits linger for 40 days, all of it connected in my mind. I did not think there was a stranger in the yard. I did not feel like something evil had come in. I just stood there with the thought that maybe, somehow, it was her. Maybe she had passed through. Maybe she was still near us. Maybe it was nothing more than a door shifting in the night. But because of when it happened, it did not feel like nothing. I cannot prove anything. I know that. A door can open for ordinary reasons. A creak can come from wood, hinges, wind, pressure, or a house settling. A calm dog does not prove anything supernatural. But grief changes the way you receive moments like that. When someone you love has just died, even small things can feel meaningful. You do not always want to explain them away. Sometimes you want to hold them as a sign, because the alternative is accepting that the person is simply gone. That night, I went back inside and continued with the rest of the night, but I remembered it. The creak, the open door, the dark backyard, and the calm dog all stayed in my mind. It was not the kind of experience that made me scream or run. It was quiet and strange, and maybe that is why it still stands out. It felt like something had moved through the house without needing to announce itself. The second story happened years earlier, when I was in 5th or 6th grade. At the time, I went to a Catholic school. It was not strict in the way some people might imagine. Where I lived, schools were usually either public or religious private schools. So going to a Catholic school did not feel unusual. It was just part of the system. One of the customs at the school was to send students and some teachers away for a retreat for a few days. The idea was that we would receive spiritual lessons, reflect on things, and spend time away from regular school life. The place we went to was large and located in a mountain area. It was secluded enough that it had the kind of atmosphere people automatically connect with spooky stories. Places like that always gather rumors. If there are trees, hills, darkness at night, and old buildings or quiet paths, people will find creepy spots. It does not matter if anything has actually happened there. Kids will create stories, and the place will start to feel haunted just because everyone agrees it should. This retreat center had a man-made lake. Technically, it might have been more like a pond, but it was big enough that I never thought of it as a pond. To me, it was a lake. It had a gazebo in the middle, and there was a small steel path leading from the land out to the gazebo. The path was narrow, so getting across it required balance. It was not far from shore, but it still felt risky enough that kids were careful on it. If you slipped, you would fall into the water. The water was not very deep. It came up to about waist height on a boy around our age. But it was still not a place anyone wanted to fall into casually. The people who ran the retreat center kept a lot of big fish in the lake, and that made the water feel unpleasant. Even if the fish were harmless, the idea of being in murky water with large fish brushing past you was enough to make most of us uncomfortable. One day, in broad daylight, something strange happened there. That is one thing that makes it stand out. It was not late at night. It was not dark. We were not sneaking around after curfew telling ghost stories. It happened during the day, when everyone was awake and there were plenty of people around. In some ways, that made it more confusing. Spooky things are supposed to happen at night, when shadows can trick you. This happened under the open daylight, right in front of a growing crowd of students. My friend walked out onto the small steel path leading to the gazebo. At first, I do not think anyone thought much of it. Kids walked around the area. Some went close to the lake. Some dared each other to go onto the path. But then he stopped. He stood completely still on the path. He was looking down. His eyes looked empty. It was like he was in a trance. At first, a few of our friends called out to him. They told him to come back to land. Maybe they thought he was messing around or trying to scare us. Maybe they thought he was staring at fish in the water, but he did not respond. He just stood there, still and silent, looking down like he could not hear us. No one wanted to go after him. The steel path was narrow, and to reach him or the gazebo, you had to balance yourself. It was not like a wide bridge where someone could casually walk over and pull him back. If someone approached him too fast, they might fall in too. And because he was acting strangely, no one knew how he would react if touched. So everyone stayed on land and kept calling his name. The crowd grew. More students came over. Some teachers or adults may have noticed too, though I mostly remember the students yelling. People were calling to him from the shore, telling him to come back, asking what he was doing, shouting his name again and again. The noise got louder as more people realized something was wrong, but my friend still did not answer. He stayed on that narrow steel path, staring downward with that empty look in his eyes. The whole scene felt unreal. In daylight, surrounded by classmates, it should not have felt scary. But there was something disturbing about watching someone you know stand there like they are not inside themselves. He did not look like he was joking. He did not look like he was thinking. He looked absent, as if part of him had gone somewhere else and left his body standing on the path. Then suddenly, he snapped out of it. It was like he woke up. He looked at us, and then he fell or jumped into the water. I still do not know which one it was. From where we were standing, it happened quickly. One moment he was standing there in that trance-like state. The next, he was in the lake. The water was not deep, like I said, but it still shocked everyone. He landed in it, confused, with water around his waist, surrounded by all those fish. For a few seconds, nobody understood what had happened. Then everyone started reacting at once. People shouted, some laughed nervously, some asked if he was okay. My friend looked confused too. He made his way back toward land, wet and embarrassed, but he did not act like someone who had just pulled off a prank. That was the strange part. He did not smile and say, "Got you." He did not laugh like he had planned it. He did not seem proud of scaring everyone. He acted like nothing had happened, or like he did not understand why everyone was so worked up. When he got back to land, we crowded around him and kept asking questions. What happened? Why were you standing there? Why did you not answer us? Why did you go into the water? He did not have an answer. He said he did not know why he had been standing there. He did not know why he had gone into the water. He did not act like he remembered some big dramatic moment. It was as if he had lost a piece of time. One moment he was doing whatever he had been doing before, and the next he was wet, standing in the lake, with everyone yelling at him. That scared me more than if he had admitted it was a joke. A prank has an explanation. A kid wants attention, acts weird, jumps into water, and laughs when everyone gets scared. But this did not feel like that. He seemed genuinely confused. He had even lost his slippers in the water, which made the whole thing more believable in a strange way. If he had planned it, he probably would not have wanted to lose them. Later, we laughed about the slippers because that is what kids do. Once the immediate fear passes, they turn the embarrassing part into a joke. But the moment itself stayed with me. There was something deeply unsettling about his empty eyes while he stood on the path. I can still picture him staring down, not responding to anyone. It was not the usual blank look of a kid ignoring people. It was different. He looked like he was somewhere else. And then, when he came back to himself, he ended up in the water with no idea why. The retreat center already had that spooky reputation because it was secluded and dark at night. Kids probably told stories about the lake, the trees, the buildings, and all the places you were not supposed to go. But this happened in broad daylight, which made it harder to dismiss as just fear of the dark. We were all there. We all saw him standing still. We all called to him. We all saw him fall or jump into the lake. I still do not know what happened. Maybe he zoned out. Maybe he had some kind of brief episode. Maybe he was daydreaming so deeply that he did not hear us, then got startled and slipped. Maybe the narrow steel path made him lose balance when he suddenly realized everyone was watching him. Those are possible explanations. They are probably the most reasonable ones. But the look in his eyes was hard to forget, and the way he acted afterward, confused and unaware, made it feel stranger. Both of these stories are not the kind where something clearly supernatural appears and announces itself. They are quieter than that. A door opens in the dark a few weeks after my mother dies, and my calm dog gives me no explanation. A boy stands frozen on a steel path over a lake during a school retreat, eyes empty while everyone calls his name, and then he ends up in the water with no memory of why. Maybe both have normal explanations. Maybe the door creaked open because it had not been closed properly. Maybe my friend simply zoned out and slipped. But both moments had a feeling to them that I have never fully forgotten. The first felt like something passing through the house at a time when I wanted to believe my mother was still near. The second felt like watching someone briefly disappear from themselves in front of a crowd. Neither one was loud, neither one was dramatic, but they were strange enough to stay with me. When I was really little, my parents had this weekend routine that I absolutely loved. On Friday or Saturday nights, they would let me stay up late and watch TV in the living room until I fell asleep. It felt like a special privilege, the kind of thing that makes you feel older than you really are. During the week, bedtime was bedtime, but on weekends, I got to stretch the night out as long as I could. I loved those nights. The living room would be dark except for the glow of the TV. My parents would eventually go to bed, the house would settle down, and I would be left there on the couch, feeling like I had the whole world to myself. I liked being awake after everyone else. It made me feel brave and independent, like I was doing something slightly forbidden even though my parents had allowed it. I would fight sleep for as long as possible, just because I could. Most of the time, nothing happened. I would watch whatever was on, slowly get more and more tired, and eventually drift off on the couch. Sometimes I would wake up later with the TV still on. Sometimes one of my parents would come out and turn it off. It was peaceful, familiar, and safe. At least it felt that way until one night. That night started like all the others. I was lying on the couch, curled up with a blanket, watching TV in the dim living room. I do not remember what was on. It was probably something boring enough that I was starting to fall asleep, but interesting enough that I kept trying to keep my eyes open. The rest of the house was quiet. My parents were already in their room. Everything felt normal. I was almost asleep when I heard a noise from the front porch. At first, I did not move. I just lay there, listening. It was a soft, repetitive creaking sound, back and forth, back and forth. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving. That porch swing had a very specific sound. Anyone who has had one knows what I mean. The chains or metal hooks creak slightly as the weight shifts, and the seat moves in a slow rhythm. It is a comforting sound during the day when someone you know is sitting outside enjoying the weather. But hearing it at night, when everyone in the house is supposed to be asleep, is something else entirely. I became nervous immediately. I was just a kid, and the front porch was right outside the living room. The sound was not far away. It was not some vague noise from the street. It was right there, just beyond the windows and the front door. The swing kept moving, slow and steady, like someone was sitting on it. For a few seconds, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe the wind had pushed it. Maybe it was still moving from earlier. Maybe I had dreamed the sound because I was half asleep. But it kept going. That soft, steady creak continued from the porch. Finally, I got up from the couch. I did not run to my parents right away. Part of me wanted to know what it was, and part of me was probably afraid they would be angry if I woke them over nothing. Kids think like that. Even when they are scared, they worry about being told they are silly. So instead of screaming or calling out, I crept quietly toward the bay windows in the living room. The bay windows looked out toward the front porch. I moved slowly, trying not to make any noise. I remember the feeling of approaching the window, my body tense, my heart already beating faster. I did not want to look, but I had to. The sound of the porch swing was still there, and I needed to see what was making it move. I peeked out, and I saw her. Sitting on our front porch swing was an older woman. She looked like she was probably in her 50s. She was wearing nothing but a nightgown, not normal clothes, not a coat, not shoes and a sweater like someone who had come to the door for help. Just a nightgown like she had walked out of her house in the middle of the night without thinking about anything else. She was covered in blood, and she was holding a huge kitchen knife. For one frozen second, I just stared. I could not understand what I was seeing. It was too wrong. There was a strange woman on our porch, in a nightgown, covered in blood, sitting on our swing like she belonged there, holding a knife in her hand. Her presence did not fit the world I knew. The porch was part of my home. It was supposed to be safe, ordinary, familiar. That swing was something family sat on. It was not supposed to hold a bloody woman with a knife in the middle of the night. Then the fear hit me all at once. I flipped out. I ran screaming into my parents' room. By the time I got there, I was so terrified that I could barely speak. I remember trying to get the words out and not being able to form them properly. My parents woke up or sat up, startled and confused, and saw me standing there completely panicked. I must have looked insane to them. I was crying, shaking, trying to explain something that sounded impossible. There was a woman outside. She was on the porch swing. She was covered in blood. She had a knife. But fear had locked up my mouth, and for a while I could not say it clearly. I was just screaming and crying, desperate for them to understand. When I finally managed to tell them what I had seen, my dad did not believe me. In fact, he got angry. He told me it was just a dream and that I needed to go back to bed. That made me even more hysterical. I knew I had not dreamed it. I had been awake. I had heard the swing. I had walked to the window. I had seen her. But to my dad, I was a scared kid who had fallen asleep in front of the TV and woken up from a nightmare. From his point of view, that was probably the most logical explanation. A child sees something scary in the dark, half asleep, and runs to the parents' room. It happens, but I refused to go back. I kept crying and screaming. I kept trying to make him understand that I had really seen someone. I must have been so scared that I could not calm down no matter what he said. My dad became frustrated. He had clearly had enough of what he thought was a childish panic over a dream. So he decided to prove to me that nothing was there. He grabbed my arm and started dragging me toward the front door. I fought him the whole way. I kicked. I screamed. I begged him to stop. I did not want to go anywhere near the front porch. The last thing in the world I wanted was to stand by the door while that woman was outside. In my mind, opening the door meant letting her in. But my dad was angry and convinced there was nothing there. He kept pulling me along, probably thinking that once he opened the door and showed me the empty porch, I would calm down and go back to sleep. We reached the front door. I was still crying and fighting him. He unlocked it. He swung it open, and he started to say, "See, there's nothing." Then he stopped. To this day, I have never forgotten the look on his face. The anger disappeared instantly. The confidence vanished. What replaced it was fear and shock so complete that I knew, even as a child, that he had seen her too. The woman turned and stared at both of us. Then she slowly stood up with the knife. That moment changed everything. My dad slammed the door shut. There was no more telling me it was a dream, no more anger, no more trying to prove anything. The danger was real, and now he knew it. The same woman I had seen through the window had been sitting right there on our porch. And when he opened the door, she had turned toward us with that knife in her hand. He moved fast after that. He told my mom to call the police while he went to get his gun. We had a 12-gauge shotgun in the house, and he grabbed it. I do not remember every detail of what I was doing at that point. I was probably crying somewhere nearby, still shaking, still trying to process the fact that the nightmare from the porch was real. My mom was calling the police. My dad had gone from annoyed parent to fully alert protector in seconds. He went back to the front door with the shotgun. He did not open the door all the way. He cracked it just enough to stick the barrel out. That image has always stayed with me too. My dad standing at the door with a 12-gauge, speaking to a bloody woman with a knife on our porch in the middle of the night. It sounds like something from a movie, but it happened in our house, on our porch, after I had been told it was only a dream. He asked her what she was doing. The woman answered. She said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." I cannot imagine hearing that as an adult, let alone as a child. The words were terrifying because they did not explain anything in a comforting way. They only made everything worse. Somebody killed my husband. But it wasn't me. She was covered in blood, holding a knife, sitting on our porch swing and saying that someone had killed her husband. Whether she was telling the truth, confused, lying, or in shock, none of us knew. But she was dangerous enough that my dad kept the gun pointed toward the door and my mother stayed on the phone with police. My dad told her the police were coming. That made her freak out. She grabbed the knife and walked away. Just like that, she left our porch and disappeared into the night. I do not know what went through my parents' minds in those minutes after she walked away. Relief, fear, confusion, maybe all of it at once. The immediate threat had moved away from our front door, but she was still out there somewhere. A woman covered in blood with a knife was loose in the neighborhood, and nobody knew what she might do next. The police found her about 15 minutes later. She was trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. That detail still chills me. If she had walked away from our porch and simply collapsed somewhere, it would still have been terrifying. But she went to another house and tried to get inside. That means the danger was not just in my imagination. It was not just a weird woman sitting quietly on a swing. She was moving through the neighborhood with a knife, trying to enter people's homes. I never slept in the living room again after that. That may sound dramatic, but it is true. The living room had been my weekend place, my little late-night freedom spot, the place where I watched TV until I fell asleep. After that night, it became the room with the bay windows facing the porch. It became the room where I heard the swing creaking. It became the room where I looked outside and saw a blood-covered woman holding a kitchen knife. I could not feel safe there anymore. What also stayed with me was my dad's reaction. Not because I blame him exactly. I understand why he thought it was a dream at first. Parents get woken up by scared kids all the time, and most of the time the kid really did have a nightmare. But I will never forget the shift in his face when he opened the door and saw that I was telling the truth. That look proved to me that what I saw was real. It was not a child's imagination. It was not a shadow. It was not a dream. It was a real woman on the porch. A real knife. Real blood. I think that was one of the first times I understood that adults could be scared too. Before that, parents seemed like they knew everything. They were the ones who checked under beds, opened closet doors, and told you there was nothing to fear. But when my dad saw that woman and slammed the door, I saw true fear on his face. Not irritation, not surprise, fear. That frightened me almost as much as the woman herself. Because if my dad was scared, then there was no safety left in pretending everything was fine. There was one more part to the story that I sometimes forget until later. Even though it is so strange, it feels like it belongs in another movie entirely. After the woman left our porch, my dad called my uncle, who lived next door. My uncle was kinda crazy, or at least that was how everyone thought of him. He was the type of person you warned directly when something dangerous was happening because you never knew exactly how he would respond. But you also knew he would not sit around helplessly. My dad called him and told him what had happened, that there was a woman outside covered in blood with a knife, and that she had walked away from our house. Apparently, my uncle went out onto his front porch with his shotgun and waited. At some point, the woman walked by. He pointed the shotgun at her and simply said, "Keep moving, bitch." And she did. That part almost sounds funny because of how blunt it is, but underneath it, the situation was still terrifying. A woman with a knife had gone from our porch to somewhere near his house, and he had to stand there armed, making sure she did not try to come in. It could have gone very differently. She could have attacked someone. She could have tried to force her way into our house. My dad could have opened the door wider. I could have stayed in the living room and not told anyone. That is one of the thoughts that bothers me most. What if I had convinced myself it was a dream? What if I had been too scared to wake my parents? What if my dad had opened the door without the warning and stepped outside before seeing her? What if she had tried the door before I heard the swing? The whole thing could have become much worse. I also think about the sound of the porch swing. That was the first warning. That slow creak in the night, the back and forth movement, the ordinary sound made wrong by the hour. If the swing had not made noise, I might not have known she was there. I might have fallen asleep on the couch with her sitting just outside the window. Or worse, she might have moved from the porch to the door without any of us waking up. For a long time afterward, porch swings at night bothered me. Even if I knew no one was outside, if I heard that slow creak, my mind went back to that night. The TV glow, the dark living room, the bay windows, the shape of her on the swing, the nightgown, the blood, the knife. Some memories attach themselves to sounds, and that one attached itself to the creak of a swing. I do not know exactly what happened to her after the police found her. I do not know if she had really found her husband dead, or if she had hurt him, or if there was something else going on entirely. All I know is what she said to my dad. "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." That sentence is still one of the creepiest things I have ever heard in a real story. It is the kind of thing that leaves too many questions. Was she in shock? Was she lying? Was she confused? Was she dangerous because she had already done something, or because something had happened to her and she had lost her mind? I was too young to understand all the possibilities, and maybe that was for the best. As a child, I only knew that a bloody woman with a knife had been outside my house. That was enough. Even now, I can still picture my dad dragging me towards the front door while I kicked and screamed, desperate to stop him. I can still feel that helpless fear of knowing what was outside while the adult in charge did not believe me. I can still see the door opening. I can still hear him start to say, "See, there's nothing," and then stop. That pause is burned into my memory, because in that pause, everything changed. I was no longer a scared kid who had imagined something. I was right, and being right was worse than being wrong. After that night, the living room was not a place for sleeping anymore. Weekends changed. I could still watch TV, but I was not going to fall asleep there with the front porch only a few steps away. The couch no longer felt cozy. The bay windows no longer felt harmless. The front porch was no longer just part of the house. It was the place where I learned that something terrifying can be sitting right outside while everyone else sleeps. I never slept in the living room again. Before the next witness tells their story, take a moment to subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. This channel is for the late hours, when sleep is close, but the mind is still awake enough to notice every sound in the room. New true stories arrive here for anyone drawn to strange encounters, uneasy memories, and nights that never felt normal again. Leave a like if the stories have pulled you in so far. Now, let's return to the darkness. My university had a large lake running through the middle of campus. It did not just sit off to one side as a decorative thing. It actually divided the campus in a way that made the lake part of daily life. Depending on where you lived, where your classes were, or where you were trying to go, you had to deal with it. There was a bridge that crossed over the water, and in the middle of that bridge there was a small island with a gazebo on it. During the day, the area was pretty. It was one of those places that probably looked good in university brochures. Water on both sides, trees near the paths, the bridge cutting across the lake, and the little gazebo sitting on the island like a quiet stopping point between one side of campus and the other. Students would walk across it all the time. Some would sit near the lake, some would stop at the gazebo. It was the kind of campus spot everyone knew. At night, though, it felt different. The lake made everything quieter. Sound carried strangely over the water, and the darkness around it felt wider than it did in other parts of campus. Even with lights along the paths, there were places where shadows gathered. The trees near the lake looked darker. The bridge felt more exposed because once you were on it, you were surrounded by water. You could see the dorms and buildings in the distance, but if you were walking alone, especially late at night, there was always that feeling that you were in between places, not quite on one side, not quite on the other, just crossing over dark water. One night, I was walking along the side of the lake, heading toward the bridge. I was going to a dorm on the other side of campus, so crossing the bridge was the easiest way to get there. It was not an unusual walk. I had done it before. Plenty of students crossed that bridge at all hours, so I had no real reason to feel afraid at first. I was walking down the sidewalk beside the lake when I noticed someone on the bridge. It was a kid wearing a gray or white hoodie. The hood was up, so I could not see his face clearly. He was on the section of the bridge that was on my side of the gazebo, walking toward my sidewalk. He looked like any other student. There was nothing strange about him at first. A guy in a hoodie walking across campus at night was probably one of the most normal things you could see at a university. So I did not think much of it. He was coming toward the end of the bridge, the same area I was approaching from the sidewalk. I registered him in that automatic way you notice people when you are walking alone. You do not stare, but you keep track of where they are. Especially at night, you want to know if someone is coming towards you, how close they are, and whether you will pass them. Everything about the situation seemed ordinary. Then I passed a big tree. The tree blocked my view of the bridge for a second. Not long. Just a brief moment where my line of sight was interrupted as I continued walking down the sidewalk. I was not standing still. I did not look away for several minutes. It was literally just the time it took to walk past the tree. When I got beyond it, I glanced back toward the bridge. The kid was gone. At first, my mind did not understand what it was seeing. I expected him to still be there, either closer to me or maybe reaching the end of the bridge. He had been walking in my direction only a second before. There should have been a person somewhere in view, but the bridge was empty, completely empty. I stopped, or at least slowed down, and looked again. I checked the section of the bridge where he had been. I looked toward the island and gazebo. I looked toward the end of the bridge near me. There was no one. He had vanished. The first thing I did was try to explain it normally. Maybe he had walked off the bridge, but that did not work. If he had continued walking in the direction he had been going, he would have had to come right by me. There was no other way off that section of the bridge. I would have seen him. I would have heard him. He could not have left without passing me. Maybe he had turned around, but that did not work either. He had only been hidden from view for a split second while I passed the tree. Even if he had turned around the instant the tree blocked him, he would not have had time to get all the way back to the island gazebo. The distance was too far. He could not have sprinted there silently in that amount of time, and he had not looked like he was running. He had been walking. Maybe he had jumped into the lake. That thought crossed my mind only because the other explanations made no sense. But that did not fit either. I would have heard a splash. I would have seen movement. And why would a random student in a hoodie suddenly jump off the bridge the moment a tree blocked my view? Nothing about that made sense. The bridge was simply empty. The kid was gone. That is the part that bothered me so much. It was not that I saw something dramatic. He did not float above the bridge. He did not turn and stare at me with a ghostly face. He did not fade away while I watched. He was just there 1 second, walking normally in a hoodie, and then he was not there anymore. Sometimes that kind of disappearance is worse than seeing something obviously supernatural. If you see a monster, at least your brain knows it is dealing with something impossible. But if you see something completely ordinary vanish in a way that should not be possible, your brain keeps trying to solve it. It keeps looking for a missing piece, a side path, a shadow, a door, a trick of light, anything. There was nothing. I stood there trying to make the geometry of the moment work, but it would not. The bridge, the sidewalk, the tree, the island, the direction he was walking, all of it was too clear. He should have either passed me or still been visible. He was neither. He was just gone. After that, the bridge never felt the same to me. I still had to cross it sometimes because it was part of campus and there were places I needed to go. But walking across it alone at night became uncomfortable. Every time I approached it, I remembered the kid in the hoodie. I would look toward the island gazebo and the long sections of bridge on either side. I would pay attention to anyone walking there. I would check the shadows near the railings. I would watch for movement. The whole area had changed in my mind. Before, it was just a bridge. Afterward, it was the place where someone disappeared. I did not go around telling everyone right away, at least not in a serious way. It was such a strange little story that I knew how it sounded. People could easily say I had misseen something, that the lighting was bad, that the guy turned around faster than I realized, or that I had looked away longer than I thought. Those are all reasonable responses. I probably would have said the same thing if someone else told me the story. But I knew what I saw. I knew how briefly the tree blocked my view. I knew there was no time for him to get anywhere, and I knew he had not walked past me. For about a year, it stayed as one of those weird campus experiences I could not explain. Creepy, but personal. Something I thought about whenever I had to cross that bridge by myself. I might have mentioned it to a few people, or maybe I mostly kept it to myself. Either way, I treated it like a strange memory that belonged to me. Then something happened that made it worse. About a year later, I was with a friend who had been abroad the semester when my incident happened. Because he had not been around, he had never heard the story from me. He was not part of whatever small circle may have known about it. As far as I knew, he had no idea anything strange had happened to me on that bridge. I started to tell him. I do not remember exactly how the conversation came up. Maybe we were walking near the lake. Maybe we were talking about weird campus stories. Maybe I just decided it was finally time to mention it. I began setting it up, probably saying something like, Something really weird happened to me on that bridge once. But before I even got to the part about what I saw, he interrupted me. He said, "Wait, did you see a guy in a hoodie disappear?" I froze. Because yes, that was exactly it. I had not told him yet. I had not described the person. I had not mentioned the hoodie. I had not said anything about anyone disappearing. But he already knew the shape of the story. Not just a vague, "Did you see something weird?" Not, "Did you see a ghost?" He specifically asked if I had seen a guy in a hoodie disappear. That hit me harder than the original experience in some ways. When something strange happens to you alone, you can doubt yourself. You can tell yourself maybe your eyes tricked you, or your memory changed the details. But when someone else describes the same thing before you even tell them, that doubt becomes harder to hold on to. Suddenly, it is not just your mind playing tricks on you. Suddenly, there is a pattern. He told me he had seen something just like it during freshman year. A guy in a hoodie, on or near that same bridge. There one moment, gone the next. I do not remember every detail of his version now, but I remember the shock of realizing he had his own version of the same story. He had seen something similar before I did, and he had no reason to know what I was about to say. That meant the bridge had not only been strange for me, something about that place had created the same kind of experience for someone else. That is when it stopped being just creepy and became genuinely unsettling, because now I had questions I could not answer. Who was the guy in the hoodie? Was he a student? Was he connected to the lake? Had something happened there before? Was the bridge known for this kind of thing and I just had not heard about it? Was it a trick of the lights, the trees, and the angle of the bridge that made people appear to vanish? Or was there actually something there that more than one person had seen? I wanted a normal explanation, but the coincidence was too specific. A gray or white hoodie, the hood up, a figure walking across the bridge, a momentary obstruction or glance away, then nothing. Gone without enough time to leave by any normal route. And then a friend who had never heard my story somehow naming the exact thing before I said it. That is the kind of detail that makes your stomach drop. After that conversation, I hated walking across that bridge alone. I still did it when I had to, but I never did it casually again. If there was another way around and I had time, I would consider taking it. If I had to cross at night, I wanted someone with me. The island gazebo in the middle, which once looked harmless, started to feel like a place where something could wait. The sections of bridge on either side seemed longer than before. Every tree that blocked my view for even a second made me uncomfortable. And if I saw someone in a hoodie on that bridge, I watched them carefully. I know people wear hoodies all the time. On a university campus, especially at night, half the students are probably wearing them. But after what happened, that image became connected to the bridge in a way I could not undo. A hood up, a pale gray or white shape, someone walking toward the sidewalk, then suddenly gone. It is such a simple image, but it still bothers me. The thing that makes the story hard to shake is that there was no dramatic ending. I did not find out later that someone drowned in the lake wearing a hoodie. I did not discover some official ghost story about the bridge. I never saw the figure again. There was no explanation handed to me, supernatural or otherwise. Just the experience, then the confirmation from my friend a year later that something similar had happened to him too. That leaves the mind open, and when the mind has no answer, it keeps returning to the same scene. I picture myself walking along the lake at night, the water dark beside me, the bridge ahead, the gazebo sitting on the island in the middle. I see the kid in the gray-white hoodie walking toward me from the bridge. I remember thinking nothing of him because there was nothing to think, just another student crossing campus. Then the tree blocks him for 1 second. I step past it, glance back, and the bridge is empty. No footsteps, no splash, no figure, no time for him to be anywhere else. Just gone. Then I picture my friend, a year later, cutting me off before I can finish. "Wait, did you see a guy in a hoodie disappear?" That moment still gives me chills, because before he said that, I could pretend it was just me. After he said it, I had to accept that at least one other person had seen something close enough to name it immediately. Maybe there is a rational explanation. Maybe the bridge had blind spots I did not understand. Maybe the lighting made people seem closer or farther than they were. Maybe there was some path or angle I missed. Maybe both of us experienced different ordinary things and connected them because they sounded similar. Maybe the hoodie detail was more common than it feels. But I know how it felt in that moment, and I know the bridge felt wrong after that. It is strange how quickly a familiar place can change. One unexplained moment can turn a normal part of campus into a place you do not trust. A bridge you used every week becomes a place where you walk faster at night. A gazebo that looked peaceful during the day becomes something you avoid looking at too long after dark. A tree that briefly blocks your view becomes part of the fear. For me, that lake bridge became one of those places. During the day, it was still pretty. Students still crossed it, the water still moved around it, and the island gazebo still looked like something from a campus postcard. But at night, I could not shake the feeling that the bridge had its own rules. People could be there, and then they could not. A figure could walk toward you, vanish behind a tree for 1 second, and disappear completely. And maybe someone else, years earlier, had seen the same thing. I never figured it out. All I know is that I saw a kid in a gray or white hoodie walking toward me on the bridge. A tree blocked my view for a second. When I looked back, he was gone. There was nowhere he could have gone without passing me, and not enough time for him to return to the island. A year later, before I could even tell the story properly, my friend asked if I had seen a guy in a hoodie disappear. He had seen it too. After that, I never liked crossing that bridge alone again. I am not sure how freaky this story sounds compared to paranormal stories because there were no ghosts, no strange shadows, no voices in the dark, and nothing supernatural about it. But in some ways, I think that makes it worse. A ghost story can be scary because you do not understand what is happening. A real-life story like this is scary because you understand just enough to know how badly it could have ended. This happened when I was about 7 years old. At that age, I was still young enough that the world felt mostly safe as long as an adult or older person was with me. If a babysitter was there, then I assumed everything was under control. Kids do that naturally. They trust the person in charge. They do not think about escape routes, danger, weapons, or strangers with bad intentions. They think about games, snacks, getting tired, and whether they are close to home yet. One day, I went on a walk with my babysitter. I do not remember why we went out. Maybe it was just to get fresh air. Maybe she wanted to keep me busy. Maybe we had gone somewhere nearby and were heading back. What I do remember is that we were walking back to my house, and we still had about a mile or so to go. We were on a fairly busy road, the kind where cars pass often enough that you do not feel completely isolated, but not busy enough to make you feel protected from everything. It was just a normal walk. At least, that was how it felt to me. I was 7, so I was probably not paying attention to much beyond the immediate moment. I might have been looking at houses, cars, trees, cracks in the sidewalk, whatever caught my attention. I do not remember feeling scared. I do not remember noticing anyone strange behind us. I was just walking with my babysitter, trusting that we were going home. Then, about halfway there, she suggested that we play Simon Says. That did not seem strange to me. It was a kid's game, and I was a kid. Babysitters play games to keep children entertained. Maybe I was getting bored or tired. Maybe she wanted to make the walk more fun. At the time, there was no reason for me to think anything else was going on. So we started playing. At first, it was simple. She told me to walk faster, then skip, then jog lightly. It felt like a normal game, or maybe just a silly way to make us move a little quicker. I followed along because that is what you do when you are 7 and someone starts a game with you. The road, the walk home, everything around us still felt ordinary. But looking back now, I understand that it probably was not ordinary for her. She must have noticed something. She must have seen someone behind us, or heard footsteps, or felt that something was wrong. Maybe she had looked back and spotted the 2 men before I did. Maybe they had been following us for a while. Maybe she realized they were getting closer. Whatever happened, she did not panic in front of me. She did not grab me and scream. She did not say, "We are being chased." She did not tell me to run because dangerous men were behind us. Instead, she turned it into a game. That is the part that still stands out to me now. She kept her head enough to make me cooperate without scaring me too badly. If she had simply yelled, "Run," I might have frozen. I might have cried. I might have looked behind me too soon and slowed down from fear. I was 7. Panic could have made me useless. But Simon Says was something I understood. It gave me instructions I could follow immediately. So she used it. First, we walked faster. Then we skipped. Then we jogged. She was probably testing how quickly she could get me moving without making it obvious. Or maybe she was trying not to alert the men behind us that she knew they were following. A sudden sprint might have made them run too early. A gradual game gave us a reason to increase speed without looking like we were fleeing. At the time, I had no idea. I just played along. Then she said, "Simon says run as fast as you can." That was when the game changed. Even then, I remember feeling a little confused. Running as fast as I could was a bigger command than skipping or jogging. It was not just playful anymore, but because she framed it as Simon Says. I did it. I ran. I thought maybe she was just making the game more exciting. Maybe I laughed at first. Maybe I thought we were racing. Then she said, "Simon says turn here." We turned down a driveway. That also confused me. It was not our driveway. It was not where I expected to go. We were supposed to be walking back to my house, and suddenly we were turning somewhere else. But again, it was part of the game. Simon said to turn there, so I turned. Only after we turned did I look back. That was when I saw them. 2 guys were chasing after us. One had a bat, the other had a knife. I do not think I fully understood the horror of that moment at the time. I saw them and I knew something was wrong, but I was still a child. My brain did not process the situation the way an adult's would. I did not think about what a bat could do. I did not think about what a knife meant. I did not think about kidnapping, assault, murder, or any of the real possibilities. I just saw 2 men running after us with weapons, and I knew we had to keep going. Now, as an adult, that image is much more terrifying. 2 men chasing a babysitter and a 7-year-old child down a road, one holding a bat and the other holding a knife. That is not a prank. That is not a misunderstanding. That is not something you can explain away as harmless. Whatever they wanted, it was not good. And the fact that they had weapons means the danger was immediate and real. My babysitter must have known that before I did. She had probably known for at least several minutes, and instead of panicking, she got me moving. We ran up to a house. I do not remember exactly what the house looked like, but I remember that we reached it and got help. Some old people lived there, and thankfully, they let us in. That is another detail that becomes more frightening the older I get. What if they had not opened the door? What if nobody had been home? What if they had looked out, seen 2 strangers running up their driveway, and decided not to answer? What if we had reached the door and found it locked with no one inside, but they let us in? That one decision may have saved us. Once we were inside, the immediate danger was behind a door. I imagine my babysitter was terrified, even if she had been hiding it before. I do not remember all the details of what happened after we got inside. Maybe someone called the police. Maybe the men ran off. Maybe the old people looked out and saw them. My memory of that part is not as clear. I was too young to understand the full situation, and fear has a way of breaking memories into pieces. What I remember most clearly is the moment I looked back. The two men, the bat, the knife, and the realization that Simon Says had not been a game. It had been a way to save us. At the time, I did not grasp how messed up the situation really was. I knew it was scary, but I did not understand the depth of it. Children often experience danger in a strange, delayed way. They know something bad is happening, but they do not fully understand what could have happened. Adults around them may be shaking and pale, while the child is confused because the event is already over. The child thinks, "We ran, we got inside, so it is done." The adult thinks, "We almost did not make it." Looking back now, I realize how calm and smart my babysitter was. She saw danger and did not make it worse by panicking. She did not tell me too much too soon. She did not let me freeze. She did not waste time explaining. She used a game I already knew and turned it into instructions I would follow without question. Walk faster, skip, jog, run as fast as you can, turn here. Those commands probably saved us precious seconds. Maybe the men were already following us when she started the game. Maybe they were gaining on us. Maybe she saw them coming from behind and knew she had to act before they were close enough to grab us. The road was fairly busy, but that clearly did not stop them. People like to imagine that danger only happens in isolated places, but that is not true. Bad things can happen near traffic, near houses, in daylight, with other people not quite close enough to understand what is going on. That is what scares me now. We were not lost in the woods. We were not in an abandoned building. We were on a road walking home. And still, two men with weapons chased us. I have no clue why. That question has always bothered me. Why were they chasing us? Did they know my babysitter? Were they trying to rob us? Were they on drugs? Were they just looking to hurt someone? Did they think it was funny? Were they targeting her, me, or both of us? Had they been following us for longer than I realized? I do not know, and not knowing makes it worse. If there had been a clear explanation, maybe the memory would sit differently in my mind. If someone had later said, "Those men were caught and they were trying to rob people," or "They mistook you for someone else," or "They were drunk and acting insane," then at least the event would have a shape. But without an explanation, it remains this open-ended piece of real-life horror. Two men chased us with a bat and a knife. That is all I know. Sometimes I think about what my babysitter must have felt during those moments. She was responsible for me. I was someone else's child. She had to keep herself safe and keep me safe at the same time. She could not run too fast and leave me. She could not stop. She had to make me move without making me collapse in fear. That is a lot to put on someone, especially if she was young herself. I wonder if she told my parents everything. I wonder if she cried afterward. I wonder if she still remembers it the way I do. Maybe for her it was even worse, because she knew exactly what was happening from the start. While I thought we were playing, she knew we were being hunted. While I was following commands, she was calculating distance, speed, safety, houses, doors, and whether the men were close enough to catch us. She had to carry the fear alone until I saw them. That thought makes me respect her more. It also makes the memory heavier. There is something chilling about danger hidden inside a children's game. Simon Says is supposed to be harmless. It is supposed to be silly. You follow commands, laugh when someone messes up, and pretend the leader is in charge. But for those few minutes, the game became a survival tool. The words sounded playful, but the meaning underneath was deadly serious. Simon says, "Run as fast as you can." That was not a game command. That was a warning. Simon says, "Turn here." That was not a random choice. That was an escape route, and because I trusted her, I followed. I think about how easily it could have gone differently. If I had been stubborn and refused to play, we might have lost time. If I had complained that I was tired, she might have had to drag me. If I had stopped to ask why we were running, the men might have gotten closer. If I had looked back sooner and panicked, I might have tripped or frozen. If the old people had not opened their door, we might have been trapped on their porch. So many small things had to go right, and somehow they did. Even now, I do not know whether to call it luck, quick thinking, or both. My babysitter's reaction gave us a chance, but the old couple opening the door finished saving us. I still feel grateful for that, even if I do not remember their names or faces clearly. They were just people in a house we ran to, but in that moment, they were safety. The older I get, the more frightening the story becomes. As a kid, I remembered it as a strange, scary thing that happened on a walk. As an adult, I understand that it could have been a kidnapping, an assault, or something even worse. I understand that weapons change everything. I understand that two men chasing a young babysitter and a child is not random childhood drama. It is real danger, and that is why it still creeps me out. Not because of anything paranormal, because it was real. There was no ghost to explain away, no haunted house, no strange dream, no shadow on a wall. There were just two men running after us with a bat and a knife, and a babysitter who had the presence of mind to turn our escape into a game until we reached a safe door. I wish I knew why they were chasing us. I wish I knew what happened to them. I wish I knew if they ever got caught or if they just disappeared back into the world and went on with their lives. But I do not. All I have is the memory of that walk, the sudden game of Simon Says, the confusion when she told me to run and turn, and the sight of those two men behind us when I look back. At 7 years old, I did not fully understand how close we might have been to something terrible. Now I do. And that is what makes the story so disturbing. My wife and I bought our first house in February of 2010. It was one of the biggest moments of our lives. Up until then, owning a home had been one of those dreams we talked about, planned for, and imagined. But finally standing there with the keys in our hands made it real. It was ours, not an apartment, not a rental, not a place where we had to ask permission before changing things. Our first house. We fell in love with it almost as soon as we saw it. It had everything we had been looking for. The layout felt right. The rooms had enough space. The kitchen was nice. The upstairs had the bedrooms and an office area I could use for my computer. It felt like the kind of place where we could build a real life together. And on top of all the things we wanted, it had a few extras too, little details that made it feel even better than expected. For the first month, everything was great. We spent a lot of time painting, decorating, cleaning, arranging furniture, and trying to make the house feel like ours. Anyone who has moved into a first home knows that feeling. You are tired all the time, but you are excited too. Every room becomes a project. Every wall color feels important. Every piece of furniture needs to be placed just right. Even the annoying work feels rewarding because it belongs to you. There were boxes everywhere at first. Tools, paint cans, brushes, tape, cleaning supplies, and half-unpacked things scattered around. But slowly, the house started coming together. We talked about where things should go. We made plans. We imagined future holidays there, future dinners, future ordinary days. It felt good. It felt safe. Then weird things started happening. At first, they were small enough to ignore. Things upstairs would be moved. Not just slightly shifted, but placed in completely different rooms from where they belonged. Something we knew had been in one room would show up somewhere else. At the time, I did not panic over it. We had just moved in. The house was still being organized. We were still unpacking and rearranging. It was easy to blame ourselves. I figured my wife had moved something and forgotten about it. That seemed much more likely than anything strange. People misplace things all the time, especially during a move. When your whole life is packed into boxes and you are constantly carrying objects from one room to another, it is easy to forget where you put things, so I shrugged it off. If something showed up where it did not belong, I assumed one of us had done it without thinking. The house also started creaking, sometimes loudly. That bothered me a little more, but I still found an explanation for it. The house was fairly new, and new houses settle. Wood shifts, temperature changes, pipes make noise, floors pop, walls creak. I had heard enough people say that houses make sounds, especially as they adjust to weather and humidity, so I told myself that was all it was. Still, the sounds were noticeable. A loud pop from upstairs, a creak in the ceiling, a shift somewhere in the walls. The kind of noises that make you pause for a second and listen before telling yourself it is nothing. And for a while, that worked. I kept telling myself it was nothing. My wife and I were busy making the house our own, and I did not want to ruin that excitement by acting paranoid. We had just bought our first home. The last thing I wanted was to start feeling uncomfortable in it. Then one day, everything changed. My wife and I were in the kitchen preparing dinner. It was a normal evening, nothing unusual about it. We were probably talking, moving around each other, chopping things, getting pans ready, doing the usual routine. The kitchen was on the first floor, and our stairs were right next to the kitchen entrance. Because of that, any noise from upstairs could be heard clearly from where we were. That detail became important. I was at the sink with the water running. Then I turned it off. The second the water stopped, the kitchen became quiet. And in that quiet, we both heard a cough. Not a creak, not a pipe, not the house settling. A cough, a human cough. It came from upstairs. For a moment, neither of us moved. We had no kids. No one was visiting. No one was supposed to be in the house except us. The windows were shut. The television was not on. There was no radio, no computer playing audio, no outside noise that could explain it. It was inside the house, above us. The feeling that went through me was like ice. A cold chill ran down my spine, so sharply that I could almost feel the blood drain out of my face. I turned and looked at my wife. She had gone pale, too. Her face had this look of absolute fear, the kind of look that says she heard exactly what you heard and is reaching the same conclusion. Someone was in our house, and they were upstairs. That thought hit me harder than anything else. It was not a ghostly feeling, not some vague unease. It was real, immediate fear. Someone could be hiding up there. Someone could have broken in. Someone could be waiting in one of the rooms. And we had been downstairs making dinner, completely unaware. I moved quickly. I grabbed the sharpest knife I could find in the kitchen. It was not much compared to what might have been upstairs, but it was the first thing I could reach. My wife called the police. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she spoke to the 911 operator, telling them we thought there might be a robber in our home. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and stood there silently. My hands were shaking. I listened. For a moment there was nothing. Then I heard a loud pop or creak from upstairs, just like the sounds I had been hearing since we moved in. Only now those sounds did not feel like the house settling anymore. They felt like movement. They felt like weight shifting. They felt like someone trying to stay quiet but failing because the house gave them away. I gripped the knife harder. Everything in me wanted to run outside and wait for the police. But another part of me could not stop listening. I was furious and terrified at the same time. This was our house. We had bought it. We had been living there. We had been sleeping there. And now there was a very real possibility that someone else was inside with us. The police arrived within minutes. Thankfully, they had been patrolling nearby, so we did not have to wait long. Even so, those few minutes felt much longer than they actually were. When you believe someone is hiding inside your home, time changes. Every second gives your imagination room to create something worse. You picture someone crouched in a closet, someone standing behind a bedroom door, someone listening to you from above. An officer came in and took control of the situation. He started up the stairs slowly with his gun drawn. He called out, "This is the police. Is anyone upstairs?" No response. I followed behind him, not right beside him, but close enough to see what was happening. Looking back, I am not even sure why I went up. Maybe I wanted to know. Maybe I felt like I had to see for myself whether someone was there. Maybe adrenaline made me stupid. But I went up behind him while my wife stayed back, still terrified. We checked the first bedroom. Empty. We checked the closet. Empty. We checked the half bathroom. Nothing. Then we moved toward the last room, my office, where I kept my PC. That room was mine in a way. It was where I spent time, where I had my computer set up, where I could shut the door and work or relax. The idea that someone might be hiding in there made my stomach twist. The officer entered and checked the room. No one. He checked the closet. No one. For a second, I felt the tension start to ease. I also felt embarrassed. There was that awful moment where I thought maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the cough had somehow come from outside. Maybe the creaks really were just the house. Maybe I had called the police and made an officer search my house for nothing. I started to feel like a complete idiot. We turned to leave the room. Then, right above us, we heard it. Creak. A sound from the ceiling. I almost lost it. All the fear came rushing back at once. The sound was right above us, not in another room, not down the hallway, above us. In my office closet, there was an access point to the attic. I had almost forgotten about it in the panic, or maybe I had not thought anyone could possibly be up there. The officer noticed it too. He went to the closet and pulled down the attic stairs. Again, he called out, "Is anyone up there? This is the police." No response. The silence was awful. He turned on his flashlight and started to climb just enough to look into the attic. His gun was ready. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I stood there watching, waiting for him to say it was empty, waiting for him to say there was nothing there, waiting for this nightmare to end. Instead, he found a man. A man in his 40s was kneeling in the attic, staring directly at him. I cannot fully describe what that moment felt like. The whole time, we had been afraid someone might be in the house, but part of me still wanted to believe there would be no one. The idea was terrifying, but unreal. Then suddenly it was real. There was a man above us. Not an animal, not a sound, not a settling house. A man. He had been up there the whole time. The officer kept his gun drawn and ordered him to come down and put his hands behind his head. The man obeyed, but he did not say a word. He did not explain himself. He did not apologize. He would not look anyone in the eye. He looked scruffy, dirty, and worn down. His clothes were filthy. He looked like someone who had been living rough for a long time. They arrested him. My wife and I were completely freaked out. I do not think either of us fully got over that moment. It is one thing to hear a noise and imagine someone in your house. It is another thing to watch the police pull an actual person out of your attic. Your home is supposed to be the one place where you can shut the door and feel safe. After that, our house did not feel the same. Later, after the police questioned him at the station, we found out who he was and how he had gotten there. He was homeless. Apparently, he had found refuge in the house while it was still on the market. He said the doors had been unlocked, so he went inside and stayed there. Most likely, a realtor had forgotten to lock the door after showing the house to a potential buyer. That one mistake gave him access. He said that whenever people came to view the house, he would hide in the second-floor attic. That means he had probably been hiding up there during showings before we even bought the place. Families, couples, realtors, people walking through the rooms, imagining their lives there, while this man was hidden above them in the attic, staying silent until they left. Then we bought the house, and he did not leave. He stayed. For a whole month, this man had been living in our house without us knowing. A whole month, while we painted, while we decorated, while we unpacked, while we slept, while we cooked dinner, while I sat in my office, while my wife and I walked through the rooms thinking we were alone. He was there. That realization was worse than the moment they found him, because once you know someone has been secretly living inside your home, your mind starts going back through every strange thing that happened. The moved objects upstairs were not my wife forgetting things. The creaks were not just the house settling. Those loud pops from above were not random building noises. They were probably him moving around. The cough we heard was just the first unmistakably human sound he failed to hide. How many times had he come down when we were asleep? How many times had he watched us from some hidden place? Had he taken food? Had he gone through our things? Had he been in our bedroom? Had he stood in the hallway while we were downstairs? Had he listened to us talking? Those questions are the ones that really haunt you afterward. The police may have arrested him, but they could not remove the knowledge of what had already happened. For a month, our home had not truly been ours. We had shared it with a stranger hiding above us, a man who knew we lived there and still stayed. Every night we locked the doors thinking we were keeping danger out. The danger was already inside. I kept thinking about the attic access in my office closet. I had probably walked under it countless times, sat beneath it, worked at my computer beneath it. Maybe he had been right above me. Maybe he heard the keyboard. Maybe he heard music or games or phone calls. Maybe he waited for us to leave the room before shifting around. The idea made my skin crawl. My wife was just as shaken. We both felt violated. That is the only word for it. Nothing about the house felt private anymore. The walls, the closets, the ceiling, the attic, all of it felt suspicious. Even ordinary house noises became impossible to ignore. A creak at night could send us both silent. A small sound upstairs could make my heart jump. We checked locks constantly. We checked rooms. We checked the attic more than once, even after we knew he was gone. I do not think people understand how deeply something like that affects you unless it happens to them. A burglary is terrible, but at least with a burglary, you usually know someone came in and left. This was different. This person had been living with us secretly, not visiting, not breaking in once, living there, hiding in the same house we were trying to turn into a home. The thought still freaks me out. I think about those first few weeks after we moved in, when we were excited and happy, completely unaware that there was someone above us. We were painting walls, choosing decorations, and arranging furniture, while he was hiding in the attic and listening. We were making the house ours, and he was already inside it. The moved items upstairs make me especially uncomfortable. At the time, they were easy to dismiss. Now they feel personal. If something was moved from one room to another, that means he was not just hiding in the attic the entire time. He was coming down. He was walking through our upstairs rooms. He was touching our things, and he was doing it quietly enough that we never caught him. That is horrifying. The cough was almost lucky in a terrible way. If he had not coughed, we might not have known for much longer. We might have kept hearing creaks and blaming the house. We might have kept noticing moved objects and blaming each other. He might have stayed another week, another month, maybe longer. The only reason we called the police was because the sound was unmistakably human and we both heard it at the same time. I still remember looking at my wife after that cough, her pale face, the fear in her eyes, the instant understanding between us that something was wrong. I remember standing at the bottom of the stairs with the knife, my hands shaking, listening to the creak above me. I remember the officer climbing the stairs with his gun drawn. I remember feeling embarrassed when the rooms were empty. Then I remember the creak above my office, the attic stairs coming down, the flashlight going up, and the officer finding that man kneeling there, staring right at him. That image has never fully left me. There is something deeply disturbing about someone hiding in an attic. Basements and attics already feel separate from the rest of a house. They are not rooms you live in. They are storage spaces, dark spaces, places with insulation, dust, and old boxes. They sit above or below normal life. The thought of a person living in one, silently moving around while you go about your day, feels almost unreal. But it was real. He was real, and he had been there for a month. I try not to think too much about what could have happened. He never attacked us. He never came at us. He did not speak when they arrested him. Maybe he was just desperate and homeless, looking for shelter and never intended to hurt anyone. Maybe he was afraid too. Maybe he did not know where else to go. There is a human sadness in that, and I understand it on some level. But understanding that does not erase the fear, because desperation does not make someone safe. A stranger hiding in your attic is still a stranger hiding in your attic. We did not know him. We did not invite him in. We did not know what he was capable of. He had already crossed a line by staying there while we lived below him. That alone was enough to make us feel unsafe. We had bought the house because it felt like the perfect beginning. For a while it was. Then we learned that our perfect first home had come with someone already inside it. Even now, thinking about it gives me chills. Not because of anything supernatural, but because it was real. All the strange little things we tried to explain away had a human source. A man had been moving around upstairs. A man had been making the floor creak. A man had been hiding in the attic while we lived our lives below him. That is the kind of thing that changes how you hear a house. Before, a creak was just a creak. Afterward, every creak sounded like footsteps. When I was a freshman in college, I ended up working on a film shoot near Barstow, out on Route 66. At the time, it felt like the kind of thing you were supposed to do if you were young, in college, and interested in film. You said yes to strange projects. You drove out to odd locations. You worked long hours for little or no money because it sounded like an experience. And sometimes the experience ended up being more memorable than the film itself. That was definitely the case with this one. We were shooting on the property of the cafe, known from the movie Baghdad Cafe. The location already had that strange desert feeling to it. If you have ever been around that part of California, you know how wide and empty the landscape can feel. The desert does not just look empty. It feels like it is holding on to things. Old roads, abandoned buildings, forgotten businesses, sun-bleached signs, rusted metal, dust, and silence. Everything out there seems like it has been left behind, but not fully erased. The cafe property had an abandoned motel attached to it, and that motel was where we were shooting our film. The movie itself was terrible. I mean, unbelievably bad. It was supposed to be a horror film, but not in the way that makes you proud to be working on it. It had that cheap student film energy, where everyone is trying to make something scary with limited resources, questionable writing, and a location doing most of the work. At the time, we probably thought we were making something cool. Looking back, I know the actual film was awful, but the location was perfect. Too perfect, really. The motel looked and felt abandoned in the way only desert buildings can. There was a dryness to it, a sense that people had left and the place had simply baked in the heat for years afterward. The rooms were worn down, the air was stale, and the whole property had that hollow feeling of a place that used to have a purpose but no longer did. It was not dressed up to look creepy. It was creepy because it had been allowed to sit there and become itself. The floors inside were covered with papers. At first, I did not think much of that. In an abandoned motel, you expect old trash. Receipts, forms, newspapers, registration slips, maybe things left behind from when the motel was still operating. I assumed the papers were just leftovers from the past, scattered around after years of neglect. Maybe the wind had blown them from one room to another. Maybe someone had dumped them there. Maybe they were part of the motel's old business records. At the beginning of the shoot, we mostly ignored them. We had work to do: lights, cameras, gear, actors, scenes, all the usual chaos of a low-budget film set. People were moving in and out of rooms. Someone was probably yelling about shots. Someone else was probably trying to make broken things look intentional. The papers were just part of the environment, texture underfoot, another sign that the motel had been abandoned for a long time. But after a while, curiosity got the better of us. During breaks or downtime, some of us started picking up the papers and reading them. That was when the whole feeling of the place changed. They were not motel records, they were handwritten letters. A lot of them. They seemed to be from the 70s, or at least that was the impression we got from the dates and the style. Some looked like they had maybe never been sent. Others were addressed to different people, dozens of them. Family members, friends, maybe officials, maybe people we could not identify. At first glance, they looked like ordinary letters someone had written a long time ago and somehow left behind. But once we started reading them, they became something else. The letters usually started out normal. That was the unsettling part. They did not immediately read like the rantings of someone completely disconnected from reality. They began with regular thoughts, normal greetings, ordinary concerns. The writer might mention someone by name, talk about where he was, or begin with the kind of everyday language people use in letters. For a few lines, you could almost imagine a lonely man writing to people from a motel room in the desert, trying to stay connected. Then the tone would shift. Slowly, sometimes within the same letter, the writing would move into darker territory. He would start describing things that were deeply wrong. Paranoia, fear, strange experiences, the sense that something or someone was watching him. He kept referring to they. He talked about them in a way that made it clear they were not just ordinary people to him. They were a presence, a force, something surrounding him, observing him, maybe controlling him. The more we read, the more disturbing it became. This was not just someone having a bad day or writing one strange note. The letters created a pattern. He was afraid of being watched. He believed things were happening to him. He wrote like a person being eaten alive by his own mind. And because the letters were scattered all over the floor of an abandoned motel, we were literally walking through the remains of that unraveling. Someone had the idea to put them in order. We started trying to assemble them chronologically based on dates or clues in the writing. That made it worse. When the letters were random, each one was just a strange piece by itself. But when we began arranging them in sequence, they started to tell a story. And the story was not good. The handwriting changed over time. At first, it was fairly normal. Maybe not beautiful, but readable. The letters were shaped like someone trying to communicate clearly, but as the letters went on, the handwriting became more chaotic. Lines slanted, words grew uneven. The pressure on the page seemed different. It looked like the person writing them was becoming more disturbed as time passed. That detail got to me more than almost anything written in the letters. Words can be exaggerated, people can write dramatic things, But handwriting is physical. It comes directly from the hand and the body. Watching it decay across pages made the man's mental state feel visible. It was like seeing someone fall apart in slow motion through ink. We were supposed to be making a horror movie, but the real horror was sitting on the motel floor. The letters described really messed up things. I do not remember every detail now, and maybe that is for the best. But the general feeling was that this man believed he was being watched, followed, or influenced by forces he could not escape. He wrote about they as if they were always nearby. Reading it gave me the impression of a man with demons, whether those demons were literal, psychological, or something created by trauma. At the time, we probably joked about it at first, because that is what young people do when they are uncomfortable. You find something creepy and you laugh because laughing gives you distance. But the more pages we picked up, the harder it became to treat it lightly. These were not props. These were not written for our film. They were not part of some planned set dressing. They were someone's private collapse left scattered in an abandoned motel for us to find decades later. Then we noticed the storage container outside. It was sitting near the motel, separate from the rooms, and it had "Keep Out" spray painted on it. Naturally, that made us curious. If you put "Keep Out" on something, especially on the set of a horror film filled with college students, you might as well be putting up a sign that says, "Please investigate this." I know that sounds stupid, and it was. We were young. We were already surrounded by creepy letters and abandoned rooms. The container felt connected to the mystery somehow, and nobody wanted to leave it alone. There was a hole in the side of it. Someone reached through and pulled out some documents. I do not remember if we expected to find anything important. Maybe we thought it would just be old junk, business papers, tools, or trash. But among the documents was a letter that changed how we understood everything we had been reading. It looked official. It was printed on government-type paper, or at least that is how I remember it. I think it may have been from the VA, though I am not completely sure after all these years. But it had the look of an official letter, not handwritten, not personal, not another piece of the man's paranoia. This one came from an institution. The letter was addressed to the same person who had written all those disturbing letters. And according to what it said, he had unknowingly been a participant in tests involving hallucinogenic substances while he was in the Army. That discovery hit differently. Until then, we had been reading the letters as the writings of a man who was mentally ill, paranoid, or maybe suffering from some kind of breakdown. It was creepy, but we could place it in that category. A disturbed man wrote disturbing letters in an abandoned motel. Sad, unsettling, but understandable in a tragic way. But the government letter changed the shape of the story. If that letter was real, then this man had not simply invented everything out of nowhere. He had been used in tests. He had been given hallucinogenic substances without knowing it. His mind had been interfered with, possibly by people he should have been able to trust. Suddenly, all those lines about they watching him felt different. Maybe he had been paranoid, but maybe he had a reason to be. That thought was sickening. It does not mean everything in the letters was true. It does not mean unseen people were literally watching him from the walls or following him through the desert. But it meant that somewhere in his past, something had happened to him without his consent. Something official, something hidden, something that could have damaged him in ways no one around him understood. Reading his letters after that felt less like reading madness and more like reading the wreckage of a person who had been broken by something real. We kept looking at the pages differently. The repeated references to they became heavier. The worsening handwriting became more tragic. The scattered letters on the motel floor stopped feeling like creepy set decoration and started feeling like evidence of a life that had gone terribly wrong. Here we were, making a terrible horror movie in an abandoned motel, stepping over the remains of someone else's real horror. And then there was the sealed room. Inside the abandoned motel, There was one room we were strictly forbidden from entering. That alone was enough to make everyone aware of it. In a place where everything already felt abandoned, a room that had been deliberately sealed off stood out. It was not just locked, it was blocked. The windows were covered with plywood. The door was barricaded shut. Whoever controlled the property did not want anyone going inside. At first, you might assume it was for safety. Old buildings have hazards, floors can collapse, ceilings can come down. There could be broken glass, mold, chemicals, animals, anything. A sealed room in an abandoned motel is not automatically supernatural or criminal. It might just be dangerous, but this room smelled like death. I do not say that lightly. It was seriously the worst smell I have ever encountered in my life. Even from outside the room, even with the windows covered and the door barricaded, the smell was there. Heavy, rotten, thick, impossible to ignore. It was not just musty old building smell. It was not dust. It was not mildew. It was not the dry smell of an abandoned desert motel. It was something deeper and fouler, the kind of smell that makes your body react before your mind finishes identifying it. Death. That was what it smelled like. Everyone knew the room was there. Everyone knew we were not allowed in. And once you smelled it, you understood why people were curious and afraid at the same time. The whole place already had this strange history under our feet. The letters, the paranoia, the government document, the abandoned motel, the storage container marked "Keep Out." Then there was this barricaded room that smelled like something dead was inside it. It was too much. The set no longer felt like a set. At the beginning of the shoot, the motel was just a cool, creepy location for a bad horror film. By the time we found the letters and the VA document and became aware of that sealed room, it felt like we had wandered into someone else's nightmare by accident. The fake horror we were trying to create suddenly seemed cheap compared to the real unease around us. I remember thinking about the man who wrote the letters. Had he stayed in that motel? Had he lived there? Had he hidden there? Had he written those letters in one of those rooms while believing they were watching him? Had he put some of them in the storage container? Had he known about the government letter? Did the letter arrive too late after years of thinking he was crazy, only to confirm that something had actually been done to him? And what was in the sealed room? That question hung over everything. Nobody was allowed in, and I do not think any of us truly wanted to break in once we smelled it. Curiosity is one thing, but that smell was a warning. It was the kind of smell that tells you the answer may not be worth finding. Whatever was behind that door, whether it was an animal carcass, sewage, old chemical rot, or something worse, it had been sealed away for a reason. Still, not knowing made it worse. Your imagination starts filling in the room. A mattress, a body, old furniture, something left there decades earlier, something connected to the letters, something that had nothing to do with the letters at all, which somehow might be even worse. The room was barricaded, the windows boarded, and the smell leaked out anyway. That was enough to make it feel like the motel still had one last secret it refused to give up. I have thought about that shoot many times since then. Not because of the movie. Honestly, the movie was so bad that it barely matters. What matters is the place, the papers under our feet, the handwriting getting worse, the official-looking letter from what I think was the VA, the idea that a man may have been unknowingly used in hallucinogenic testing while in the army. The way his words about being watched suddenly felt less easy to dismiss. The storage container with "Keep Out" sprayed on it. The sealed room that smelled like death. It was all too strange to feel like coincidence, even if it probably was just a cluster of terrible, unrelated things left behind in one abandoned place. But abandoned places collect stories. That is what I learned. They collect whatever people leave behind. Trash, furniture, paperwork, damage, rumors, smells. and sometimes pieces of a person's mind. You can walk into a place thinking it is empty, only to find that it is full of evidence. Evidence of people who lived badly, suffered quietly, lost control, or were forgotten. That motel had been forgotten by most people, but the letters were still there. The room was still sealed. The smell was still coming through. And for a few days, while we were trying to make a fake horror film, we were surrounded by something much more disturbing. I do not know what happened to the man who wrote those letters. I do not know if he recovered, disappeared, died, or simply moved on to another place. I do not know if the government letter was exactly what it seemed to be, or if we misunderstood part of it. I do not know what was behind the barricaded door. I do not know why those letters were left all over the motel floor, or why no one had cleaned them up, or why no one seemed to care that they were there. That lack of answers is what makes it stick. If someone had explained everything, maybe it would feel less haunting now. If we had learned that the room contained a dead animal, that the letters belonged to a known former tenant, that the government document had some clear context, then the story would have a place to land. But we never got that. We only got fragments. A desert motel, a bad horror shoot, handwritten letters from the 70s, a man writing about they watching him, handwriting falling apart over time, a storage container marked "Keep Out," an official letter saying he had unknowingly been part of hallucinogenic drug tests in the army, a sealed motel room we were forbidden to enter, and the worst smell I have ever encountered in my life. That was the real horror film. We just happened to be shooting ours on top of it. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nockmeyer Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night. And if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.